I now request our distinguished guest and Mayor of Carmel, Mr. James Brainard, to address the gathering.
I want to thank everyone here for coming today and for the tremendous hospitality everyone in this city has shown to me. It's my first trip to India, and it's been a wonderful visit for me. I look out and we talk about political parties. We talk about difference and approach and how to implement things. I think the most important thing for us to do is to look out at the children that we would see outside this hotel, or the children you would see in Carmel, Indiana, or the children anywhere on earth. And when you look at children, I don't see a communist, and I don't see a Republican, and I don't see a Democrat, but I do see people that are going to inherit this earth from us. And it's something that we need to pass on in good condition for them and for their children, regardless of party. There's a saying in the United States among mayors that there's no Republican or Democrat way to fix the roads or to fix the sewage. And that's really true. And so I think this sort of meeting is a wonderful thing. We can come together and learn from each other. I already have quite a few ideas that I want to take back to my city that I've seen done in India. And hopefully the information about our city is useful. Even though there's a great difference in size, the similarity is the quickness of the growth. And I say that a large city, whether it's 1 million, 5 million, 20 million, 30 million, is nothing more than a series of small towns and villages together. Because people live in neighborhoods. They don't live in a city, they live in a neighborhood. And we need to make certain that each of those neighborhoods present the most opportunities possible. Well, let me direct your attention to the screen at the other end of the room. And as I talk, I've brought some pictures of my city. That's actually City Hall. My office is up right behind that white flower on the top floor. We have a famous magazine in the United States called Money Magazine. We are capitalists, Mr. Beebe. But every 2 years, they do a contest to determine the most livable city at different levels of cities, and we're in the category of 50,000 and 300,000 people. And you can see that's a family from Carmel on the front cover. And they looked at over 700 cities in that category and named our city the best place to live in the United States. Well, it also came right before an election, so it was a good thing. In all seriousness, it's very helpful to me when I go to companies to say, why don't you add good jobs in my city to have something like this? There's Carmel. We're in the middle of the country. We're in the state of Indiana, which is 6.5, just under 7 million people. We're in the Indianapolis metropolitan area, which is about 2 million people. And we're the largest suburb. Today our population is about 100,000 people. And there we are in Indiana, in the very middle. So as I give presentations around the United States, I often show this picture, and the first thing I say is, this is not Carmel. We have no palm trees, we have no place to sail boats, we have no mountains, we have no oceans. This is San Diego, which is a beautiful place, but they're one of our competitors for good jobs. I also point out, this is not Carmel either. Again, we have no mountains. I like to ski. I wish we did have a mountain. But this is Aspen in Colorado. But again, it's a place where we have to compete for people that will fill good jobs, for bringing jobs to Carmel. This isn't Carmel either. It's beautiful, but it's not Carmel. This, on the other hand, is my palate. This is what we have to work with. It's flat. It is green, at least half the year. It's white the other half of the year. It snowed, in fact, yesterday at home. No mountains, no natural waterways in our city to speak of. And this is what we have to work with. So how do you build a great city without the mountains and oceans and a good climate? Well, I always point out that these people had the same set of conditions. Lousy weather, no mountains, no oceans, but yet they built a beautiful city. In fact, one of the most beautiful cities on earth. And so if they can do it, I suggest to my voters and constituents that we can do it as well. People say to me, what's your overall goal as you build this new city that's growing so quickly? And say it's really about creating a place where people can thrive. And for this presentation, I went to the dictionary and copied it. A place where people can prosper. A place where people can grow or develop vigorously and flourish. And I might add, not just the elite, not just the people whose parents were wealthy, but this is a place where everybody, regardless of their background, regardless of where they came from, regardless of what their parents did, can thrive. And that is what that's what building a true city is about. A city where people, regardless of where they come from, can thrive. A little bit more about Carmel, Indiana. 1 out of 10 people living there today have moved in this generation from India. And 8 out of 100 people have moved from China. People speak over 41 different languages in our city. This was not the way it was when I was a small boy. Somebody from Canada was a curiosity. Or maybe the next state. I'm serious. It was a very different place then. But it's a wonderful thing for our community and for our children because they grow up with so many different ideas and different perspectives. They meet other children of different religions, different backgrounds from different countries. And as a result, they're much better suited to be global citizens. I've always had a theory. My undergraduate degree was in history, and as I studied history, I always thought so many great advances were made in places where different cultures came together. Places like Istanbul, for instance, where East met West and the traders met from different places. As you go around the world, you see places that were great trading centers, 100, 200, 300, 400 years ago, and there were often also the places where great advancements were made over time. What I want to talk about now is a little bit about how we have built our city over the last 20 years. And to do that, I need to talk about how other cities in the United States, and quite honestly, across the globe, have chosen to build their cities. We knew how to design cities that worked for thousands of years. Because pretty much the same, we could only build so high, and people had to walk from place to place. We didn't have motorized vehicles. So in 1929 was the start of the Great Depression in the United States and across the globe. And what we had then was maybe 25% over the last 20 years before then, from 1910, 1909 or so to 1929, 25% of the households in the United States had automobiles. And when the Depression came, that number fell because people couldn't afford to maintain those automobiles. And then in December of 1941, when the United States was attacked and we entered the war, World War II, gas, oil, rubber were rationed. And people, unless they had a purpose that aided the war effort to drive a vehicle, were not allowed to. So 1945 and the end of the war comes, and America is relatively unscathed compared to parts of Asia and most of Western Europe and Eastern Europe. And so the average working person in America was better off than ever before. And our cities were crowded because there hadn't been any building for about 20 years. Antibiotics were just hitting the market, so the overcrowding in our cities tended to lead to disease. They were still powered by coal and were very dirty. The air was dirty to breathe. And that was the conditions we had in 1945. I remember as a small boy, I'm not quite that old, a small boy going to a big city and asking my mother, what's that black dust on my face and hands at night? It was coal dust. Our cities were very dirty. And natural gas, which is now used basically to heat and cool much of the U.S., and wasn't used until the early 1960s. So suddenly, the average working person, though, had lots of money. They wanted to get out of the cities. Cars were inexpensive. Everybody wanted a car. They moved out, and they went out to the suburbs. And the suburbs suddenly, because people now had cars, were not designed like the traditional cities and large housing tracts. And we didn't think ahead, and we didn't realize that by putting all the houses in one place and all the buildings in another and all the offices over here, it worked when there were just a few people moving out of the cities. But as it continued in the 1950s and 60s and 70s and 80s and early 90s, suddenly we realized the average American driving from place to place, because the whole idea of a village where you could walk everywhere, or a city made up of villages, was in the past. And these new cities, our suburbs, were designed so that you had to drive a lot. And the average American, including all the Americans in the big cities that didn't drive at all, but the average American was driving 2 hours a day in their car. I like my car, but I don't like it that much that I want to spend 2 hours a day in it. It's not a good quality of life. Think of that wasted time, what could be done. Think of the carbon that's produced by the car, the cost to operate it. And so what we tried to do in Carmel was to reinvent how suburbs are designed. And even though we didn't have a downtown, because it was all sprawl, one-story sprawl for the most part, we said we want the center of our city to be very different. And so we were a suburb that created a very traditional city in its downtown. And we did that through public-private partnerships. And so there's a name for that in the United States. It's called TND, or Traditional Neighborhood Development. And what it really means is mixed-use zoning, putting the stores, just like it's done traditionally throughout India for centuries, stores and houses close to each other. But we quit doing that in the United States. It was about focusing on pedestrians and people as opposed to roads for cars. And it was about using materials and cutting down on the amount of pollution so that people would enjoy walking, enjoy being outside, keeping the streets clean, and making sure we had pavement or sidewalks off the vehicular portion of the road where the cars are. Utilities. One of the things we wanted to do was to improve the air quality. And so we borrowed, some people might say steel, but we worked with a city in Denmark. And the waste that's generated by our sewage plant, we learned how to heat it to a very high degree, 900 degrees Fahrenheit. Basically, it turned it into a clean fertilizer that could be used by farmers. So instead of paying workers every